Hello, and welcome to another CS Talk. Today, we shall be talking about the inception of clinical trial regulations and how they have evolved ever since. We'll also be talking about occurrences in history that shaped clinical trial regulations and informed how these regulations have evolved. In one of our previous videos, we talked about the importance of countries and government putting functioning clinical trial regulatory bodies in place and the need to implement and adhere to ICH-GCP and other relevant regulations and guidelines. Many in these regions that we are hoping to reach with our message, of course, may question the feasibility of implementing these regulations due to unfavorable conditions on ground, as you can already imagine. With this brief historical content, we hope to motivate persons concerned and show them that even in Western world where we largely have functioning clinical trial regulation implemented, that this was and is in no way an easy ride for these countries and region.
That's true, Frank. So clinical research has always been conducted by scientists and physicians as early as the 16th century. For example, in 1662, the Flemish physician by name Johann Baptista randomly divided patients into two groups to receive two different treatments. A couple of years after that, in 1747, the Scottish surgeon James Lind separated seamen that were suffering from scurvy into three groups. Two groups received two different treatments, and the third group, which is the control group, received seawater.
Well, thank you, Steven, for that illustration. But even though some elements of clinical research were visible in the activities of these physicians, as you've already mentioned, there were no set rules and regulation governing these activities. And a consequence of this situation was that, as it is in natural human behavior in the nature of humans, where there are no rules and regulations, abuse, misconduct, fraud, or even crime are inevitable. Take, for example, during the Third Reich, Nazi physicians conducted several experiments on prisoners, persons of other races, without their consent and without any form of regard for the lives of these persons. After the fall of the Third Reich at the end of the Second World War in 1947, if you will, a set of research ethics principles for human experimentation was drafted in the so-called Nürnberger Code. The Nürnberger Code provides that a person can only be involved in clinical trials following a set of ethics principles. And some of these ethics principles, to name a few, were one, there must be voluntary consent from the subject or patient to be recruited. Another one is that the scientific plan based on prior knowledge from animal experiment is mandated. So any clinical trial that should be conducted in human must have been tested in animals before bringing it to humans. And this is what most scientists do in the labs, like the PhD students, the postdocs, and other scientists in labs. This is what they do. So they do the preclinical research before we can go to the clinical research. And another important one was the positive risk benefit assessment. This gives this mandate to say that no patient or no trial can be conducted except there is a positive benefit for the patient or subject that are involved in that trial.
Okay, so even with the Nürnberger Code in place, there were some events or mishaps in history that prompted a need for clinical research regulations. An example of such events is what is known as the Tuskegee trial, where syphilis experiments were conducted in African American men in the US. Another example was the use of an approved drug called thalidomide, which was given to pregnant women to treat morning sickness. The drug was later found to cause malformations in unborn children. So following this sequence of unfortunate events, the World Medical Association met to draft what is today known as the Declaration of Helsinki. So the Declaration of Helsinki is a statement of ethical principles for medical research involving human subjects. Some of the new principles from these meetings were the protection of vulnerable subjects. That is, people who are not in the best position to make decisions to participate in clinical trials. Also, the need of approval from an ethics committee. So each clinical project must first be reviewed and approved by an ethics committee before the trial can go into effect. Another point was patient safety and well-being must supersede scientific interests.
Well, thank you very much, Stephen, for that. But as we all know, even with the Declaration of Helsinki, a series of unfortunate, unsuccessful, and ineffective clinical trials were still recorded.
That's true.
This in turn prompted a continuous revision and improvement of existing guidelines, leading to what we now know as the ICH-GCP. Now, the ICH-GCP was further revised to provide a unified standard for the European Union, Japan, and the United States to facilitate the mutual acceptance of clinical data by regulatory authorities in this jurisdiction in what we know as the ICH-GCP E6 Revision 2 R2. This guideline has been amended to encourage implementation of improved and more efficient approaches to clinical trial design, conduct, oversight, recording, and reporting, while continuing to ensure human subject protection and reliability of trial results.
So this is a brief summary of the history of clinical research regulation and the events that prompted the drafting and continuous revision of these regulations. So thank you for listening. Please reach out to us should you have any question or if you require further information. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you.